Hi, you're listening to Book Chat with author Vivian E. Moore.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome to Book Chat. I am your host, author Vivian E. Moore. Hope everyone had a great week and I hope that you're having an even better weekend. All right, we're going to get straight to today's show. The title is I'm Feeling Good. And the topic is how a great book sways emotions. Well, there's a special kind of magic in finding the right book. The kind that grabs you from the first page and it doesn't let go. Even longer after you've read the final sentence. You close the cover, you take a deep breath, and you just feel good, right? But why? Well, what is it about a great book that can lift your spirits? It can change your mood or even change your life. That's powerful, right? Well, that is the emotional power of a story. Because great books are more than just ink and paper, okay? They are emotional journeys. And one moment you're laughing, and then the next you're wiping away tears. Well, a well-written story, it has the power to reach inside and to stir something deep. Because what it does is it mirrors real life with all of its highs and lows, joys and heartbreaks. That reflection, what it does is it creates a connection, a resonance that's both comforting and exhilarating, right? So not only does a great book make you feel good, but what it does is additionally is it offers you a break from reality. Let's just face it, life can be so overwhelming. And we know it, just day-to-day life, just everything that takes place in the course of 24 hours can be overwhelming. But, a great book, it offers a refuge and a temporary escape from all of that. Whether you are exploring something that is fantastical, or, if you are just reading a book that has you walking in the shoes of someone that is so very different from who you are. Because what books have the ability to do, that magical power, is to transport you away from reality. And in that escape, you find whatever it is you need, whether it's healing or inspiration or just a much needed breather. Don't we all need those? Yes, indeed. So, by the end, you feel refreshed, you feel recharged, you feel good, right? So let's talk about how feeling good from reading a great book can build empathy just a little bit by bit, okay? Because reading someone else's struggles or their triumphs or even just their inner thoughts, what it does is it fosters that empathy, right? Because you begin to understand their perspectives that you hadn't even really considered before, okay? So that emotional expansion, what it does, it helps you to become more connected. And not just to the characters, but, to the people in your own life, right? Because that kind of growth, it leaves you feeling fuller and richer and yes, good, right? Some people have likened the effects of reading a good book like the feeling of afterglow, right? And you can visualize that however you want to, right? You can add your own explanation to what I mean by afterglow. But but the best books, they don't just end when the story does, right? They linger. You carry them in your thoughts, and you quote them in conversations, and you can replay those scenes in your mind like your favorite movie, right? Because that lingering emotion, it leaves an imprint, okay? Because it is so powerful of a reminder of how something as simple as reading can move your soul and brighten your day. So whoever said that reading is fundamental, it's not a coincidence, and they were not lying, okay? Speaking of the afterglow, I have read so many books that have just left me feeling emotional, or maybe happy, or just laughing out loud. I read so many books, but I can recall books that I've read from childhood, right? First learning how to read when I was 3 years old, and introduced to the Dr. Seuss books, right? And, those books, they were silly, when you look at them now as an adult, but they were teaching you things, right? They were teaching you that redundancy of learning, right? Because we know that's how children learn, right? And just the silly stories, but they were, as a child, they gave you even more imagination, right? They stretched your imagination. They made you reach far beyond what you were reading in the books to, just use your own imagination to help you to learn how to discover and how to build on things. And I think that is a part of learning, right? When we learn how to use our minds to the most effective reaches that we can. Okay, and so learning how to read and reading those first books, those Dr. Seuss books, they were repetitive in what they said, but still having that repetition helps you to learn, and it helps you to hold on to all of those things that you've learned. And those books left me, even to this day, with a great feeling. I can laugh about what I read. Green Eggs and Ham, and the books, the stories about the Who and Thing 1 and Thing 2 and all of those things. I can recall them from my childhood memories because they stayed with me, because those books left an impression on me. We've talked about that, how books can make an impression on you, whether a good impression or a bad impression, but more so good impressions, right? And then also I remember as a teenager, the first time I was introduced to a romance novel. My sister did it. And it was this book named Shanna by Kathleen Woodward, right? To this day, I can tell you, from the opening scene, and you've heard me mention it before, about all the things that I felt just reading those words, and it just came to my thoughts. I could envision them. I could see them, as though I was there, during that time, during those happenings, and all the things that took place in that story. I can still remember them vividly. Because that book, right, it made an impression on me. And, and I still think about it to this day. And, and that author is still one of my favorite authors. I don't read a lot of historical romances anymore, and that's what that was. But still, it gave me the opportunity to build on that for later, when I became a writer myself. It taught me how to write those introductory scenes that grabs the readers from the very first beginning of the story, and not only grab their attention, but hold it throughout the story. That is the model of a great writer, because they know how to write. They know how to tell a story. You find a lot of authors that they know how to write, but they don't know how to tell a great story. But when you get a mixture of both of those things together, I guarantee you have a masterpiece, right? And even in my adult life, I have read so many books that have left memorable imprints on me that I just can't shake. From time to time, I'll think about, a book that I read. And I mean, I probably read that book years ago, but it still lingers. It still stays with me, and, maybe a funny part that was in the story and I just have to laugh about it, or a great mystery that I've read, and it just leaves you wondering, how did they come up with all of this? Even as a writer, sometimes stories are just so great. They are just so, they just feel so authentically written that it makes you wonder, how did they come up with this? Did they experience it? Have they spoken with someone that experienced it? How did they come up with this material? And that is the effects of a great author, even to another author. When you're reading their work, it's just so impressive that it leaves that imprint on you. It makes you want to be like them, right? You not necessarily want to copy their style of writing, but it sort of leads you to develop your own style of writing. So you can have that same great impression on other writers, that are coming along the way. So it's a great feeling to know that, that books can leave such an impression on you that they linger with you. They stay with you, right? They just leave you feeling so good that you just can't help it. You want to share those stories with anyone that you come in contact with. You want them to feel exactly how you felt when you read that story. And, I have shared many a story because they left such a great impression on me. Even people who really don't read the same genre of books that I do, but I'm like, this can change your life, right? If you read this story, it will change your life. Maybe you didn't care for this type of book, whether it's a romance, thriller, fantasy, whatever it is, sci-fi. But after reading this book, it will definitely change your mind, and it can possibly change your life. So, just get into it just a little bit. That it's that afterglow of reading something that just left, again, such a great impression on you. Because, for me, those stories don't end, right? I can still remember them, from the beginning to the end, because, they just left me with that feeling of just feeling good after reading it. You hear people talk about feel-good movies or feel-good stories. Books have that same effect on people. And that's why you have people who collect books, right? They have a collection of great stories that, that are on their bookshelves. Or if you are into ebooks, you have a collection of ebooks. Now, I do have those because, when you collect books, they take up space, right? Especially in the volume of books that I read on a daily basis. So, you have to have somewhere to store them. So I sort of, lean toward ebooks for that reason, because, there's the iCloud. So, that's where they live until I want to read them again. And I do have a collection of books that are listed under my favorites. So that way, when I want to revisit those stories, all I have to do is go to my favorites, and there they are. Okay. And I'm sure if you're like me, you probably have a ton of them too. But, in the end, a great book, it doesn't just tell a story. It transforms your mood, right? It uplifts and it inspires, and it makes you say with a smile that you can't quite explain, I'm feeling good. All right, guys, that's it for today. And I hope that you will enjoy your weekend. And as I always say, before I end each and every show, always tell those who you care about the most how you feel about them today, because tomorrow is not promised, and today may be the only chance you get to say it. So on that note, I love you. I hope you love me back. And until the next time you hear my voice, God bless you and goodbye.
Loved what you've heard on this week's episode? Well, the answer is simple. It would mean the world to us if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review and feedback. Spreading the word really is the best way to grow our podcast and achieve even greater things. Thank you.